Chapter 18 Sati and the Fire Arrow. Nothing can be done, my lord, said a visible, uncomfortable Ayurvati. She and Shiva were standing in a corner of the hut, at what they thought was a safe distance beyond the range of Sati's ears. Parvateshwar was standing beside them, holding his tears back. Come on, Ayurvati, urged Shiva. You are the best doctor in the land. All we have to do is wait for the fever to break. This fever cannot be broken, reasoned Ayurvati. There is no cure for the Agni Ban poison. We are only lengthening Sati's agony by keeping the fever low. The moment the medicines are stopped, the fever will recur with a vengeance. Let it go, Shiva, mumbled a frail voice from the bed. Everyone turned to stare at Sati. Her face wore a smile that comes only with the acceptance of the inevitable. I have no regrets. I have told you what I needed to. I am content. My time has come. Don't give up on me, Sati, cried Shiva. You are not gone yet. We will find a way. I will find a way. Just bear with me. Sati gave up. She didn't have the strength. She also knew that Shiva had to find his own peace with her death, and he wouldn't find that unless he felt he had done everything possible to save her. I can feel my fever rising, said Sati. Please give me the medicines. Ayurvati glanced at Sati uncomfortably. All the medical training told her that she should not do this. She knew that she was just increasing Sati's suffering by giving her medicines. Sati stared hard at Ayurvati. She couldn't give up now, not when Shiva had asked her to hang on. Give me the medicines, Ayurvati ji, repeated Sati. I know what I am doing. Ayurvati gave Sati the medicine. She gazed into Sati's eyes, expecting to find some traces of fear or anguish. There were none. Ayurvati smiled gently and walked back to Shiva and Parvateshwar. I know, exclaimed Shiva. Why don't we give her the somras? What effect will that have, my lord? Asked a surprised Ayurvati. The somras only works on the oxidants and increases a person's lifespan. It doesn't work on injuries. Look, Ayurvati, I don't think anyone truly understands everything about the somras. I know, you know that. What you don't know is that the somras repaired a frostbitten toe that I had lived with all my life. It also repaired my dislocated shoulder. What? Said a visible surprised Parvateshwar. That's impossible. The somras does not cure physical disabilities. It did in my case. But that could also be because you are special, my lord, said Ayurvati. You are the Nilkant. I didn't drop from the sky, Ayurvati. My body is as human as Sati's. As human are yours. Let's just try it. Parvateshwar did not need any more convincing. He dashed out to find Varaka sitting on a stool. Varaka immediately rose and saluted his commander. Varaka, said Parvateshwar, the temple may still have some somras powder. It was the main production center of the area. I want that powder now. You will have it in 10 minutes, my lord, boomed Varaka as he rushed off with his guards. There is nothing else to do but wait, said Ayurvati as Sati fell asleep. The somras had been administered a stronger dose than usual. Parvateshwar, you are tired. You need to recover from your wounds. Please go and sleep. I don't need sleep, said Parvateshwar stubbornly. I am staying on guard with my soldiers at the perimeter. You can't trust those Chandravanshis. They may launch a counter-attack at night. A frustrated Ayurvati glared at Parvateshwar. Her belief reinforced that the machismo of the Kshatriyas made them impossible patients. Are you going to bed, my lord? asked Ayurvati, turning towards Shiva, hoping that at least he would listen. There is nothing you can do now. We just have to wait, and you need the rest. Shiva just shook his head. Wild horses could not drag him away from Sati. We could arrange a bed in this hut, continued Ayurvati. You could sleep here if you wish, so that you can also keep an eye on Sati. Thank you, but I'm not going to sleep, said Shiva, briefly looking at Ayurvati before turning towards Sati. I am staying here. You go to sleep. I will call you if there is any change. Ayurvati glared at Shiva and then whispered, As you wish, my lord. A tired Ayurvati walked towards her own hut. She needed to get some rest since the next day would be busy. She would have to check the wounds of all the injured to ensure that recovery was proceeding properly. The first 24 hours were crucial. Her medical corps had been divided into groups to keep a staggered all-night vigil for any emergencies. I will be with the soldier, Shiva, said Parvateshwar. Nandi and Veerbhadra are on duty outside along with some of my personal guards. Shiva knew what Parvateshwar actually wanted to say. I will call you as soon as there is a change, Parvateshwar, said Shiva, looking up at the journal. Parvateshwar smiled weakly and nodded to Shiva. He rushed out before his feelings could cause him any embarrassment. Parvateshwar sat alone and silent, while his soldiers maintained a distance out of respect. They knew when their lord wanted to be left alone. Parvateshwar was lost in thoughts of Sati. Why should a person like her be put through so much suffering by the Almighty? He remembered her childhood. The day when he decided that here was a girl he would be proud to have as his goddaughter. That fateful day when for the first time and only time he regretted his vow to not have any progeny of his own, which foolish father would not want a child like Sati. It was a lazy afternoon more than 100 years ago. Sati had just returned from the Gurukul at the tender age of 16, full of a verve and a passionate belief in Lord Rama's teachings. Lord Brahmanayak still reigned over the land of Meluha. His son Prince Daksha was content being a family man, spending his days with his wife and daughter. He showed absolutely no inclination to master the warrior ways of the Kshatriya. Neither did he show the slightest ambition to succeed his father. On that day, Daksha had settled down for a family picnic on the banks of the river Saraswati, a short distance from Devagri. Parvateshwar was then a bodyguard to Daksha and was conscious about his duties. He sat near the prince, close enough to protect him, but far enough to give some privacy to the prince and his wife. Sati had wandered off into the forest in the distance, while remaining close to the river so that she was visible. Suddenly, Sati's cry ripped through the silence. Daksha, Virini, and Parvateshwar looked up startled. They rushed to the edge of the bank to see Sati at the river bend, ferociously battling a pack of wild dogs. She was blocking them to protect a severely injured woman. It could be seen even from the distance that the caste unmarked fair woman was a recent emigrant who did not know that one never approached the banks without a sword to protect oneself from wild animals. She must have been attacked by the pack, which was large enough to bring down even a charging lion. Sati! Shouted Daksha in alarm. Drawing his sword, he charged down the river to protect his daughter. Parvateshwar followed Daksha, his sword drawn for battle. Within moment, they had jumped into the fray. Parvateshwar charged aggressively into the pack, easily hacking many with quick strikes. Sati, rejuvenated by the sudden support, fought back the 4 dogs charging towards her all at once. Daksha fought ferociously despite an obvious lack of martial skills with the passionately protective spirit that only a parent feels for his offspring. But the animal could sense that Daksha was the weakest amongst their human enemies. 6 dogs charged at him at the same time. Daksha drove his sword forward in a brutal jab at the dog in front of him. A mistake. Even though Daksha felled the dog, his sword was stuck in the dead animal. That was all the opening that the other dogs needed. One charged viciously from the side, seizing Daksha's right forearm in its jaws. He roared in pain but held on to his sword as he tried to wrestle his arm free. Another dog bit Daksha's left leg, yanking some of his flesh out. Seeing his lord in trouble, Parvateshwar yelled in fury as he swung his sword at the body of the dog, clinging to Daksha's arm, cutting the beast in half. Parvateshwar pirouetted around in the same smooth motion and slashed another dog charging at Daksha from the front. Sati moved in to protect Daksha's left flank as he angrily stabbed the dog that was clinging to his leg. Seeing their numbers rapidly depleting, the remaining dogs retreated yelping. Daksha, sobbed Virini as she rushed to hold up her collapsing husband. He was losing blood at an alarming rate from his numerous wounds, especially from the thigh. The dog's sharp incisor must surely have pierced a major artery. Parvateshwar quickly blew his distress conch shell. A cry for help reached the Scots at the closest crossing house. Soldiers and paramedics would be with them in a few minutes. Parvateshwar bound his angavastram tight around Daksha's thigh to stem the bleeding. Then he quickly helped the injured foreign women move closer to the royal party. Father, are you all right? Whispered Sati as she held her father's hand. Damn it, Sati, shouted Daksha. What do you think you were doing? Sati fell silent at the violent response from her doting father. Who asked you to be a hero? Harangued Daksha, fuming at his daughter. What if something had happened to you? What would I do? Where would I go? And for whom were you risking your life? What difference does the life of that woman make? Sati continued to look down, distraught at the scolding. She had been expecting praise. The crossing house soldier and paramedics rushed to the scene. With efficient movements, they quickly stemmed the flow of Daksha's blood. After dressing Parvateshwar's and Sati's minor wounds rapidly, they carried Daksha on a stretcher. His wounds needed attention from the royal physician. As Sati saw her father being carried away, she stayed rooted, deeply guilty about the harm her actions had caused. She was only trying to save a woman in distress. Wasn't it one of Lord Rama's primary teaching that it is the duty of the strong to protect the weak? She felt a soft touch on her shoulder. She turned to face Captain Parvateshwar, her father's savior bodyguard. Strangely though, his face sported a rare smile. I am proud of you, my child, whispered Parvateshwar. You are a true follower of Lord Ram. Tears suddenly burst forth the Sati's eyes. She looked away quickly, taking time to control herself. She looked up with a wan smile at the man she would in days to come grow up to call Pitra Tulya. She nodded softly. Jolted back into the present by a bird call, Parvateshwar scanned the perimeter, his eyes moist with emotion. He clutched his hands in a prayer and whispered, She is your true follower, Lord Ram. Fight for her. Shiva had lost track of time. Obviously, nobody had been assigned to reset the Prahar lamps when so many lives were still in danger. Looking out of the window, he could see early signs of dawn. Shiva's wounds burned, crying for relief, but he wasn't going to give up. He sat quietly on his chair next to Sati's bed, restraining himself from making any noise that would disturb her. Sati held his hand tightly. Despite the searing heat of her feverish body, Shiva did not move his hands away. His palms were sweaty due to the intense heat. He looked longingly at Sati and softly whispered, "Either you stay here or I leave this world with you. The choice is yours." He felt a slight twitch. He looked down to see Sati's hand move ever so slightly, beads of perspiration gliding down between their entwined palms. Though whose perspiration it was, he could not say. Is it Sati's or mine? Shiva immediately reached out with his other hand towards Sati's forehead. It was burning even more strongly, but there were soft beads of perspiration on the temple. A burst of elation shot through Shiva's being. "By the great Lord Brahma," whispered Ayurvati in awe, "I have never seen anything like this." She was standing beside Sati's bed. The still sleeping Sati was sweating profusely. Her bed and garments were soaked. Parvateshwar stood by her side, his face aglow with hope. "The Agniban fever never breaks," continued a stunned Ayurvati. "This is a miracle." Shiva looked up, his face shimmering with the ecstasy of a soul that had salvaged its reason for existence. "May the holy lake bless the Somras." Parvateshwar noticed Sati's hand clutched tightly in Shiva's, but he did not comment. The bliss of this moment had finally crowded out his instinctive drive to stop something unacceptable under the laws of the land. "My lord," said Ayurvati softly, "we must bathe her quickly. The sweat must be removed. However, considering that her wounds cannot get wet, my nurses will have to rub her down." Shiva looked up at Ayurvati and nodded, not understanding the implication. My lord," said Ayurvati, "that means you will have to leave the room." "Of course," said Shiva. As he got up to leave, Ayurvati said, "My lord, your hands would need to be washed as well." Shiva looked down, noticing Sati's sweat. He looked up at Ayurvati and nodded. "I will do so immediately." "This is a miracle, Sati. Nobody has ever recovered from an Agniban," said Ayurvati, beaming from ear to ear. "I will be honest, I had given up hope. It was the Lord's faith that has kept you alive." Sati was laying on her bed, wearing a smile and freshly washed clothes. A new bed had been brought in with freshly laundered and sterilized lines. All traces of the toxic sweat triggered by the Somras had been removed. "Oh no," said a self-conscious Shiva. "I did nothing. It was Sati's fighting spirit that saved her." "No, Shiva, it was you, not me," said Sati, holding Shiva's hand without any hint of tentativeness. "You have saved me at so many levels. I don't know how I can even begin to repay you. By never saying again that you have to repay me." Sati smiled even more broadly and held Shiva's hand tighter. Parvateshwar looked on gloomily at both of them, now unhappy with the open display of their love. "All right," said Ayurvati, clapping her hands together as if to signal the end of an episode. "Much as I would like to sit here and chit-chat with all of you, I have work to do." "What work?" asked Shiva playfully. "You are a brilliant doctor. You have an exceptional team. I know that every single injured person has been saved. There is nothing more for you to do." "Oh, there is, my lord," said Ayurvati with a smile. "I have to put on record how the Somras can cure an Agniban wound. I will present this at the medical council as soon as I return to Devagri. This is big news. We must research the curative properties of the Somras. There is a lot of work to do. Shiva smiled fondly at Ayurvati. Sati whispered, "Thank you, Ayurvati ji. Like thousands of others, I too owe my life to you." "You owe me nothing, Sati. I only did my duty." Ayurvati bowed with a formal namaste and left the room. "Well, even I," mumbled Parvateshwar awkwardly as he walked out. Parvateshwar was surprised to find Ayurvati waiting for him outside. She was standing at a safe distance from the guards. Whatever it was that she wanted to talk about, she did not want the others to hear. "What is it, Ayurvati?" asked Parvateshwar. "I know what's bothering you, Parvateshwar," said Ayurvati. "Then how can you just stand by and watch?" "I don't think it is right. I know that this is not the correct time to say anything, but I will raise the issue when appropriate." "No, you should not." "How can you say that?" asked a shocked Parvateshwar. "You come from a rare family which did not have even one renegade Brahman during the rebellion. Lord Ram insisted that the law had to be followed strictly. He demonstrated rapidly that even he wasn't above the law. Shiva is a good man, I won't deny that, but he cannot be above the law. Nobody can be above the law, otherwise our society will collapse. You above all should know this." "I know only one thing," said Ayurvati, determined. "If the Nilkant feels it is right, then it is right." Parvateshwar looked at Ayurvati as if he did not recognize her. This could not be the women he knew and admired, the women who followed the law without exception. Parvateshwar had begun to respect Shiva, but the respect had not turned into unquestioning faith. He did not believe that Shiva was the one who would complete Lord Ram's work. In Parvateshwar's eyes, only Lord Ram deserved absolute obedience, nobody else. "In any case," said Ayurvati, "I have to leave. I have a theory to think about." "Really?" asked Shiva. "You mean it is not necessary in Meluha that the emperor's firstborn son succeed him?" "Yes," replied Sati, smiling. Shiva and Sati had spent many hours over the previous week talking about matter important and mundane. Sati, while recovering quickly, was still bedridden. The convoy had set up camp at Kunj till such time as the injured were ready to travel. The journey to Lothal had been called off. Shiva and Parvateshwar had decided that it was better to return to Devagiri as soon as the wounded were able to. Sati shifted slightly to relieve a bit of the soreness in her back, but she did not let go of Shiva's hand while doing so. Shiva leaned forward and pushed back a strand of hair that had slipped on to Sati's face. She smiled lovingly at him and continued. "You see, till around 250 years ago, the children of the kings were not his birth children. They were drawn from the Maika system, so there was no question of knowing who the firstborn was. We could only know his first adopted." Fair point. But in addition, it was not necessary that the first adopted child would succeed. This was another one of the laws that Lord Ram instituted for stability and peace. You see, in the older days, there were many royal families, each with their own small kingdoms. "All right," said Shiva, paying as much attention to Sati's words as to the hypnotizing dimples that formed on her cheeks when she spoke. These kings would probably be at war all the time, so that one of them could be overlord for however short a period. "Obviously," smiled Sati, shaking her head at the foolishness of the kings before Lord Ram's time. "Well, it is the same everywhere," said Shiva, remembering the constant warfare in his part of the world. Battles for supremacy amongst the kings led to many unnecessary and futile wars, where the only ones who suffered were the common people. Continued Sati. Lord Ram felt it was ridiculous for the people to suffer so that the egos of their kings were fed. He instituted a system where a Rajya Sabha and ruling council consisting of all Brahmins and Kshatriyas of a specific rank was created. Whenever the emperor died or took sannyas, the council would meet and elect a new emperor from amongst Kshatriyas of the rank of brigadier or above. The decision could not be contested and was inviolate. I have said it before and I will say it again, said Shiva with a broad smile. Lord Ram was a genius. Yes, he was, said Sati enthusiastically. Jai Shri Ram. Jai Shri Ram, repeated Shiva. But tell me, how come your father became the emperor after Lord Brahmanayak? After all, the highness is the firstborn of the previous emperor, correct? He was elected just like every other emperor of Meluha. Actually, it was the first time in Meluhan history that a ruling emperor's son was elected emperor, said Sati proudly. But your grandfather helped your father get elected? I have never been sure about that. I know my grandfather would have liked it if my father had become emperor, but I also know that he was a great man who followed the rules of Meluha and would not openly help his son. Lord Bhrigu, a great sage respected across the land, helped my father a great deal in his election. Shiva smiled at her as he tenderly ran his hand across the side of her face. Sati closed her eyes, exulting in the sensation. His hand glided along the side of her body to rest on her hand again. He squeezed it softly. Shiva was about to ask more about the relationship between Daksha and Lord Bhrigu when the door suddenly swung open. Daksha, looking deeply exhausted, stormed in. Following him were Virini and Kanakala. Shiva immediately withdrew his hand before Daksha could see where it was, but Daksha had noticed the movement. Father? Cried a surprised Sati. Sati, my child, sighed Daksha, kneeling next to Sati's bed. Virini knelt next to Daksha and ran her hand lovingly over her daughter's face. She was crying. Kanakala remained at a distance and greeted Shiva with a formal namaste. Shiva returned Kanakala's namaste with a beaming smile. Parvateshwar and Ayurvati waited next to Kanakala, politely leaving the royal family alone in their private moment. Nandi, Veerbhadra and Kritika stood behind him. A discreet aide silently brought in 2 chairs for the royal couple, placed them next to the bed, and left just as quietly. Daksha, Virini and Kanakala, accompanied by 2,000 soldiers, had immediately left Devagiri on hearing the news of Sati's injury. They had sailed down the Saraswati to the inland delta of the river and then had ridden night and day to reach Kunj. I am all right, father, said Sati, holding her mother's hand gently. Turning towards her mother, she continued, Seriously, mother, I am feeling better than ever. Give me 1 more week and I will dance for you. Shiva couldn't suppress a grin even as both Daksha and Virini smiled indulgently at Sati. Looking at her father, Sati continued, I am sorry to have caused so much trouble. I know there are many more important tasks at hand and you had to unnecessarily rush here. Trouble? Asked Daksha. My child, you are my life. You are nothing but a source of joy for me, and at this point of time, you can't imagine how proud I am of you. Virini bent over and kissed Sati's forehead tenderly. I am proud of all of you, continued Daksha, looking back at Parvateshwar and Ayurvati. Proud that you supported the Lord in what had to be done. We actually fought back a terrorist attack. You can't imagine how much this has electrified the nation. Daksha soothingly continued to pat Sati's hand as he turned to Shiva and said, "Thank you, my lord. Thank you for fighting for us. We know now that we have put our faith in the right man." Shiva could not find anything to say. He smiled awkwardly and acknowledged Daksha's faith with a slight nod and a courteous namaste. Turning to Ayurvati, Daksha asked, "How is she now? I was told she is on her way to a total recovery." "Yes, Your Highness," said Ayurvati. "She should be able to move in another week, and in 3 weeks, the only memory of the wound would be a scar." "You are not just the best doctor of this generation, Ayurvati," said Daksha proudly. "You are, in fact, the best doctor of all time." "Oh no, Your Highness," cried a flabbergasted Ayurvati, gently pinching her ear lobes to ward off any evil spirit that might take umbrage at the undeserved compliment. "There are many far greater than me, but in this case the miracle was Lord Neelkant's and not mine." Looking briefly towards a visibly embarrassed Shiva before turning back to Daksha, Ayurvati continued, "I thought we had lost her. She got the terrible fever after we pulled the Agniban out. You know that there are no medicines to cure the Agniban fever, Your Highness, but the Lord refused to lose hope. It was his idea to give her the somras." Daksha turned to Shiva with a grateful smile and said, "I have one more thing to thank you for, my lord. My daughter is part of my soul. I wouldn't have been able to survive without her." "Oh no, I did nothing," said Shiva, self-conscious. "It was Ayurvati who treated her." "Therein lies your humility, my lord," said Daksha. "You truly are a worthy Neelkanta. In fact, you are a worthy Mahadev." An astounded Shiva stared at Daksha, his expression serious. He knew who the previous Mahadev, the god of gods, was. He did not believe he deserved to be compared to Lord Rudra. His deeds did not qualify him for that honor. "No, Your Highness, you speak too highly of me. I am no Mahadev." "Oh, yes, you are, my lord," said Kanakala and Ayurvati almost simultaneously. Parvateshwar looked on silent, not wanting to press the issue as Shiva disliked being called Mahadev. Daksha turned towards Sati. "What I don't understand is why you jumped in front of the Lord to take the arrow. You have never believed in the legend. You have never had faith in the Neelkant like I have. Why then did you risk your own life for the Lord?" Sati did not say anything. She looked down with an uncomfortable smile, embarrassed and ill at ease. Daksha turned to Shiva to see him wearing the same sheepish expression as Sati's. Virini looked at her husband intently. She waited for him to rise and speak to Shiva. Suddenly, Daksha stood up and walked around the bed towards Shiva, his hand folded in a formal namaste. A surprised Shiva rose and returned Daksha's namaste with a slight bow of his head. "My lord, perhaps for the first time in her life, my daughter is tongue-tied in my presence," said Daksha, "and I have also come to understand that you will willingly give unto others, but never asked for anything for yourself. Hence, I must make the first move." Shiva continued to stare at Daksha, frowning. "I will not lie to you, my lord," continued Daksha. "The laws clarify my daughter as a Vikrama because she had given birth to a stillborn decades back. It is not a very serious crime. It could have been due to the past life karma of the child's father. But the law of the land holds that both the father and the mother be blamed for the tragedy. My darling daughter was put in the category of Vikrama because of this incident." Shiva's expression made it clear that he thought the Vikrama law was unfair. "It is believed that Vikrama people are carrier of bad fate," continued Daksha. "Hence, if she marries again, she will pass on her bad fate to her husband and possibly her future children." Virini looked at her husband with inscrutable eyes. I know my daughter, my lord, continued Daksha. I have never seen her do anything even remotely wrong. She is a good woman. In my opinion, the law that condemns her is unfair, but I am only the emperor. I can't change the law. Parvateshwar glared angrily at Daksha, upset that he served an emperor who held the law in such low esteem. It breaks my heart that I can't give my daughter the happy life that she deserves, sobbed Daksha, that I can't save her from the humiliation that a good soul like her suffers daily. What I can do, though, is ask you for help. Sati looked at her father with loving eyes. You are the Nilkant, continued Daksha. In fact, you are more than that. I genuinely believe that you are a Mahadev, even though I know you don't like to be called one. You are above the law. You can change the law if you wish. You can override it if you want. An aghast Parvateshwar glowed at Daksha. How could the emperor be so dismissive of the law? Then his eyes fell on Shiva. His heart sank further. Shiva was staring at Daksha with undiscussed delight. He had thought that he would have to convince the emperor about Sati. But here he was, quite sure that the emperor was about to offer his daughter's hand to him. If you decide to take my daughter's hand, my lord, no power on earth can stop you, contented Daksha. The question is, do you want to? All the emotions in the universe surged through Shiva's being. His face wore an ecstatic smile. He tried to speak, but his voice was choked. He bent down, picked up Sati's hand gently, brought it to his lips, and kissed it lovingly. He looked up at Daksha and whispered, I will never let go of her. Never. A stunned Sati stared at Shiva. She had dared to love over the last week but had not dared to hope, and now her wildest dream was coming true. She was going to be his wife. An overjoyed Daksha hugged Shiva tightly and said softly, My lord. Virini was sobbing uncontrollably. The spectre of a lifetime's injustice had been lifted off Sati. She looked up at Daksha, almost willing to forgive him. Ayurvati and Kanakala stepped up and congratulated the emperor, the queen, Shiva and Sati, Nandi, Kritika and Veerbhadra, who had heard the entire conversation, expressed their joy. Parvateshwar stood rooted near the door, furious with such disregard for Lord Ram's way. Shiva, at long last, regained control of himself. Firmly gripping Sati's hand, he looked at Daksha. But your highness, I have a condition. Yes, my lord. The Vikrama law. It doesn't need to be changed, my lord, said Daksha. If you decide to marry my daughter, then the law cannot stop you. All the same, said Shiva, that law must be changed. Of course it will be, my lord, said a beaming Daksha. Turning towards Kanakala, he continued, Make a proclamation to be signed by the Nilkant saying that from now on any noble women who give birth to a stillborn child will not be clarified as Vikrama. No, your highness, interrupted Shiva. That is not what I meant. I want the entire Vikrama law scrapped. Nobody will be a Vikrama from now on. Bad fate can strike anyone. It is ridiculous to blame their past lives for it. Parvateshwar looked at Shiva in surprise. Though he did not like even a comma being changed in any of Lord Ram's law, he appreciated that Shiva was remained true to a fundamental canon of Lord Ram's principles. The same law applies to everybody equally and fairly, without exceptions. Daksha, however, looked at Shiva in shock. This was unexpected. Like all Meluhans, he too was superstitious about the Vikrama. His displeasure was not with the Vikrama law itself, but with his daughter being classified as one. But he quickly recovered and said, Of course, my lord, the proclamation will state that the entire Vikrama law has been scrapped. Once you sign it, it will become law. Thank you, Your Highness, smiled Shiva. My daughter's happy days are back, exulted Daksha, turning to Kanakala. I want a grand ceremony at Devagiri when we return, a wedding the likes of which the world has not seen before, the most magnificent wedding ever. Call in the best organizers in the land. I want no expense spared. Daksha turned to look at Shiva for affirmation. Shiva looked at Sati to admire her joyous smile and glorious temples. Turning towards Daksha, he said, all I want, Your Highness, is to get married to Sati. I won't mind the simplest ceremony in the world or the most magnificent, so long as all of you, Brihaspati and the Ganas, are present. I will be happy. Excellent, rejoiced Daksha.